When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World,
When it's Bruh Meets World.
your Boy Meets World fan cast. I'm Siege.
And I am a Tony Curtis.
Tony, we're here to do our season 7 report card. It has been 7 seasons and 7 years for that matter, and we've done it.
I'm very excited to have this recap episode with you. For our listeners, we are going to be doing a giant series, Boy Meets World, every single season, big giant recap episode as like our final episode. But and just so you know, I'm saving all of my nostalgia for that episode.
Are you saving all your loving?
Saving all my loving for them, because season 7, as I reviewed it as its own entity, boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah, there are things grading it, like just looking at the grades. I was like, this is very interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so before we do that, first of all, I want to thank you guys as always for listening to us. We got so many of your messages for our season 7, and I think I'll read some of them when we do like the series recap. But like a lot of you did reach out and told us that you were happy to be on that journey with us. We really appreciate it. It was fantastic to be able to do, and really fantastic to hear from you guys. So just wanted to give you credit. And also, we have a little class discussion, things that we could talk about. There were a few questions that were thrown to us from our listeners. So I just wanted to read a few of them, and Tony, get your thoughts.
Great. Let's do it.
Okay, we get Red Ebony 101 says, this is referring to our She's Having My Baby Back Ribs episode.
Okay.
This episode infuriated me. It was bad from beginning to end. It was just gross on so many levels. If I didn't choose to watch the episodes so I would understand when I listened to the recap, I would have turned it off. I just hated the way that they treated Topanga and Eric. Corey didn't bother to ask her what was actually wrong. The fat phobia was a lot, and I hated it. I also hated that it boiled down to she just doesn't want sex. It just shows how superficial it all is. Don't even get me started on "you're beautiful, that's why I married you." I feel like episodes was infuriating to so many people, and it showed that this isn't really about lessons because they didn't treat it well. They basically just asked us to recap our thoughts on that episode. What did you think about what she had to say?
Clearly this is an opinion that we both had. We agree. We were also infuriated by the entire episode. And honestly, it's probably one of, there's a lot of stinkers in season 7, but it's easily one of my least liked episodes of the season for all the reasons that she said. It's offensive on so many levels. It's not a great episode. It feels like cheap shots. And so I channel that rage.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that even with some distance now, I knew that episode was going to be hard for a lot of people. And I remembered it from like when we first started this podcast, like season 1. I was like, oh, there's that one episode where like we make fun of Topanga. I do want to say when she was like, I think we hit on this, the idea of I married you because I thought you were beautiful. That's what this is all about. The idea that we don't really get any further development from Topanga. It's one of our only storylines where we get Topanga and Eric together. Like that episode is going to be brought up later on in this episode where we're talking about like the highs and lows, because I do feel like that episode had a lot of potential based on like where it could have gone. And it's really upsetting that, it went nowhere other than fat phobia. Okay, now we have Ali Naguib, who is like, I'm gonna say one of our most frequent commenters. So
shout out to is either Ali or Ali. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah,
shout
out
to you. You are
Ali.
Active on our Patreon. We love the communication. We want more of it.
Okay, so I thought this was really important. He asked, in regards to A Brave New World, parts 1 and 2, what grade would you have given it if the 2 parts were just one episode? Like, again, when they premiered, they were, and we individually, but if you could, how would you have graded them as a whole? Parts 1 and 2, Brave New World.
Well, honestly, we were I looked back. I think on our Brave New World, I gave it a B, you gave it a B plus, and on Brave New World Part 2, I gave it an A plus, and you gave it an A. I think it would have just been a solid A episode. I truly, I think it would have been a merging of the two.
I think the real question is, what do you give this episode if you remove all the clips? Like, that's one of the things that we really need to discuss, because the clips really do a lot of the heavy lifting. And because of the fact that this is the final episode, and we've been watching for 7 seasons, and it kind of like throws you back in, I think that like the clips really helped get us in a sentimental mood. But if you remove the clips, what do you think the episode would have gotten?
Honestly, the entire emotional weight of the episode is really dependent on the clips. There's really not a great finale there otherwise. So without the clips, I think you're down to like a C, sans maybe the last scene. Probably will bump it up a bit, but like it's definitely not in the A category. It's probably more in like a B, healthy B.
I love that you said that, because that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, I think that this episode, if you take out all the clips, is actually like a C episode.
Okay, while we're talking about the finale, I want to talk to you about this because you were on vacation, so you weren't here when I made this discovery, which is that in the season 2 finale, I'm sorry, part 1 of the series finale, there's that scene where Alan says to Amy, basically, Eric's going with them, right? And she's like, oh, okay. Then we cut to Jack and Rachel in the kitchen. He's like, you're going to the Peace Corps? They actually cut out a big chunk of that, which is that Jack says, my dad found out about the Peace Corps and freaked out and gave me all the money I need for I'mJack.com. And then Rachel says, oh, I thought I was going to have a Peace Corps buddy. And he says, well, I'm going to do this instead. She's like, you're going to the Peace, you're going to be rich. And he's like, yep. And you're going to the Peace Corps. She's like, yep. And they just have like this little awkward moment. So later on, when he says, you know what, Rachel, actually save me a seat, it actually is because there was dialogue explaining it. And we had a whole section of our review where we were like, what the fuck is going on with this Jack storyline? And so I just wanted you to know that, because I discovered it and I like read the transcript of like the script that from the original, and I was like, why was this cut out? It explains so much.
It explains so much, and you're right. I feel vindicated, because as I said, I kept looking and being like, what did I miss? This doesn't make sense. But that is such a big explanation. Do you have any updates on like whether or not it actually premiered like in the original?
Okay, so that's a great question, and that's the one thing I was trying to find and I couldn't really find any information. Obviously it was so long ago, but what I have to assume is that the original episode, which aired as a 1 hour instead of a 2-parter, did not include the 10 or so minutes of Last Week on Boy Meets World that we get on part 2 of the finale. So I'm assuming that the edit that took place in that part 2 was to make time for that recap, which I'm assuming aired originally. I don't know.
That's so interesting. Okay, so it's also like, I think you're probably right, because it was like an hour long and it's broken into part 1 and part 2. And when you consider the fact that, again, they weren't preparing for binging or streaming or anything like this, I think even if you got the DVDs, like, it would be broken up. They probably did edit it and they were like, this isn't important. We have him saying goodbye in the next one. So I could see someone like just haphazardly taking that out, but sure. I did not know that. I'm so glad that you shared that with me, because that absolutely makes a difference.
My jaw dropped when I found it.
I'm glad. And I wonder, that also makes me wonder, because like we know, especially with Disney Plus, they move things around.
Yeah.
Lots of TV shows, like they get like a different edit just based on like, the licensing agreement and stuff. So I do wonder, this is like, I was talking to someone the other day about like the Mandela effect. Yeah. And the fact that like with us not having physical copies of things, that's going to happen more and more, because we're going to remember stuff that's going to get edited out, and like the official record has been changed.
Somewhere in the world there is a VHS copy of this finale that my mom had in a box somewhere that I don't know if she kept. gosh, if anyone has a recorded finale from the night it aired, please watch it and let us know if that scene is included.
You guys, if you have questions or things that you want to say to us in our series recap, please hit us up at brummiesworld@gmail.com or on all of our platforms, our Patreon, our YouTubes. We have so many ways for you to contact us, and all of them are at brummiesworld or at brummiesworld@gmail.com. Thank you. Now let's get into the honor roll.
All right.
That's our highs and lows. How we've done it previously and how I would do it this time is, what do you think is the highest rated episode outside of A Brave New World? Because you are right that A Brave New World was what we rated the highest, but what other episode do you think was our highest?
I think the two other ones that are in the running are Angela's Ashes, which is Angela's final episode, and then The Honeymoon is Over, which is the one where Corey and Topanga come back from their honeymoon and they don't have a place to live and they're kind of smacked in reality. I felt
Do
like
you think that, or are you looking at notes that help you cheat?
well, no, I'm looking, you know what it is that like I like wrote down like a list of what my favorite episodes were, and those were that and the finale, like those were in the running for my favorite episode. So
absolutely, The Honeymoon is Over is in fact our number 2 episode with the second highest rating. As I said earlier, A Brave New World Part 2 specifically was the highest rated episode we had done. And again, I'm gonna say a lot of that is the nostalgia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say it's the nostalgia, but I also was like, that last scene alone could have carried a grade for it. So it's definitely up there. But I think the thing that's the most interesting is that even when I was like looking through season 7 episodes and trying to think about like which ones were my favorite, like The Honeymoon is Over was a good episode, but there's nothing in me that's like, oh, I can't wait to rewatch this episode.
Really? I remember like really enjoying it, and I think that it's one of my favorite. And I think it's just because like that's the episode where we treat Corey like he has in fact been in this world, and someone needs to give him like a wake-up call. That's what I think I remembered about it, and what I really liked about that episode. So I absolutely was a fan of
We loved that Corey's entitlement was getting called out. We loved that, you know, Topanga and the traditional gender roles were being highlighted and kind of discussed in a way that gave some substance to the episode. And I think the thing about it that we loved was that it really had a balance of humor and serious moments that really harkened back to like the peak of Boy Meets World. That's what I think this episode is why it's good, is because it reminds us of when the show used to give us that shit on the regular.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm saying I don't know if this is a standout episode in general or if it's just a standout episode for season 7.
You know, that is a good question. I think relatively, if I'm gonna really think about everything, it probably is like an average Boy Meets World episode, but in this season, it was definitely up there.
Because
go ahead.
I was just gonna say we had a lot of shenanigans this season. There was a lot of shit that we just were rolling our eyes at, and I think it was just a breath of fresh to.
I think it was a lot of stuff that you were rolling your eyes at. I was actually pretty open to what
you were surprisingly on board with season 7.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I looked at season 7 and I was like, okay, I'm taking you for what you are, and I'm not asking of anything more. So. Okay. The fan favorite episode, which we always like to list. We've had a lot going on this season ourselves. I would say the Quiet on the Set episodes would be some of our highest listened to episodes.
Sure.
And most engagement. So like that's just one I want to call out. But if we were talking about of season 7, it would be Angela's Men. They blew that episode up. They loved them some Angela's Men. And to be fair, it's a really good episode. So
I'm really surprised. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Angela's name is actually in the episode and she's a fan favorite. And so I think the Angela based episodes are the ones that people remember a lot. They have a lot of attachments to, things like that. I remember from watching that episode that you and I had a very big problem with the fact that like Sean was doing like annoying with his persistent efforts to win her back, that the show, instead of focusing on Angela and her relationship with her dad, really focused entirely on Sean, almost like way too much, to the point where at the end of that episode where she's like, I don't love you, Sean and her dad basically figure it out for themselves that no, you in fact do love Sean. So
Yeah,
it was
and don't get me wrong, I definitely have a problem with that. Okay, so that being said, whoever you are, I just want to give you a really quick shout out. One of our listeners wrote us, and I was looking for the comment for the longest. Tony can attest to this, but they pointed out that there is a Navy base that is not too far from not a Navy base, an Army base that is not too far from Pennsylvania. It is, I think, Joint Base McGuire in New Jersey. So maybe that's where he's stationed, and that's why he's gone for long periods of times, but he is also able to like come visit her before he's just off and going to Europe. So first of all, I just wanted to give credit to that. So thank you guys for giving us that little background. And then additionally, you're right in the sense that one of the biggest problems that you and I will always have is the way that this show treats women.
Yeah.
Shocker. And the fact that like we don't really get to see Angela make like that decision for herself. I want to read one of the comments on this episode. This is from another superfan, Kristen Romney, who she says, the one thing I really like about this episode is that it got to the why. Very often characters act a certain way without the show really diving into why they are acting that way. And the reason Angela was so resistant to getting back together with Sean was because of her mother. That said, I think it would have been interesting for a more of a build-up as opposed to a sudden revelation, because up until this point, we as viewers are just convinced that Angela is over Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a great insight. You know, I wish we got more Angela focused development in that episode, but you know, I feel like we have to do with what we can with what we're given. And you know, I feel like this episode tries to make Angela and her trauma with her mom, her commitment issues front and center, while also not letting her as a character be front and center. We get so many antics with like Eric in that episode. Do you remember all of the like hidden antics of him trying to sneak up on Topanga? Like there's so much stuff in the episode that is fun, even if it's a little cartoony for me. That I felt like got more attention than her emotional development. So I'm glad that the fans have things that they like about the episode. I'm glad that you guys listened to it. I'm shocked that that's the most listened to episode, but at the same time, like Angela's in the name.
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit more, and then also I want to address with what you talked about. One is that we also have to remember that this is kind of like the side episode where we see like them do like the ROTC of it all.
Sure.
I remember being like, why didn't we use more of Jack in this episode? Because we see Jack become like obsessed with his body, and like it just wouldn't make sense for him to actually be really into it at this point in time, considering that we know where he goes. And I also feel like this would have been a great time for us to learn about his money issues. So I just wanted to like pull that out in terms of like things that I would change about it. And then we have another comment from, I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just gonna say HRIORDANS. How would you say that?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's your handle, know that we are reading your comment right now. And it says the chemistry between Ryder and Trina is the realest of anyone on the show, in my opinion. The intimacy between those two characters and the level of comfort they have with each other as actors is so clear when rewatching, especially in this one. I know Trina said there was mutual crush between the two of them, and I think it's incredibly obvious here. I love this episode, best of season 7, in my opinion.
You know, what I will say in response to that is I love the Sean and Angela development. There's one episode that I want to bring up that has really like bugged me, and I'll add it to our detention section or whatever. But that picket fences episode where they're living together, but they're like so guilted by their sin that they just decide to stop living together. I'll never forgive the show for that episode because it really made no sense. And I think if Sean and Angela were living together this year before she left, it would have upped the stakes and made it a bigger deal, I think, versus them just dating as boyfriend girlfriend.
It's so funny that you say that. You're right. We have to save a lot of this for the detention, but I am just remembering like the crazy like what was it? Like musical chairs we played with everyone's living situations.
Yeah.
It was just like constantly being shuffled. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Well, what other favorite episodes did you have that we didn't talk about yet from the season?
Actually, so my top episodes were A Brave New World and The Honeymoon is Over. Those were like the ones that I had graded the highest. I will say that there are ones that I remember a little bit more. I think They're Killing Us is one that I actually graded highly. But again, that's only if we take our approach, which is that the story is being told from Corey and Topanga's perspective, and therefore is a heightened reality. That makes it more of a fun, zany episode. And then on top of that, no, I know how people feel about as time goes by. But again, they're some of the ones that I remember. And then also Brothers is one of the ones that we really, not Brothers, it's the one where they have the garage sale. That one is another one where I just really think that it is more impactful to the overall lore of Boy Meets World. So
well, I have a list of my top 5 episodes.
you did top 5. Okay.
I also have a list of your top 5 episodes based off of grade that I think you would be surprised to hear.
Okay.
So, okay, so just based off of grades alone, and this is like going through the season, my top 5 episodes were Brave New World 2, It's About Time, which I gave an A-. And
I told you.
Remember It's About Time, but the thing about that episode was that I didn't think I liked it, but I guess I did. It's the wedding episode. It's About Time, sure. Angela's Men, Brave New World 1, and The Peace, aka Seven the Hard Way, were my top 5. Your top 5: Brave New World 2, Angela's Men, Brave New World 1, The Honeymoon is Over, and then Peace, Seven the Hard Way. So we had very similar top 5s.
Like I said, but for the most part, we hit the same ones, which is why I didn't go over them. But I think the same I feel about, in retrospect, I feel about Seven the Hard Way, aka Peace, the same way I do about A Brave New World Part 2, which is just to say that like I feel like the nostalgia is actually a lot of what makes these episodes impactful and not necessarily the episodes themselves.
I think that in the same way that Part 2 of Brave New World was able to save Part 1, I think that Part 2 of the War and the Peace thing was able to do the same. I think that Part 1 has a lot of issues of the war. I think that there are so many things where Corey is blatantly disrespecting Rachel, showing her semi-naked body in like a public setting, which they never circle back to. There's just a ton of issues there. But episode 2, The Peace, I think smooths over a lot of it. I had a lot of fun with the alternative timelines. It has a lot of shortcomings, but overall, like, it's an ambitious story, so I had fun with it.
I just think it's funny because like that's what we consider like the official what do we call it, the goatee timeline. Like, it does seem like from that episode, every decision that they decided that they would end up as, all of those characters are just heading towards that exact same future based on
with very little differences. They've learned nothing because that dream sequence was nothing. I can't get into it.
Absolutely. Okay. Favorite character?
Favorite character for me this season, I'm probably Eric? No. I'm gonna say, God, I honestly don't know.
I love that you said that. Here's the thing. The reason why I let you go, I didn't have one. I was like, it's actually really crazy when I think about everyone's character. I don't think that there's anyone who I feel actually stood out in the way that I would want them to.
Well, I feel part of that has to do with the fact that, I mean, is there a clear arc for any of our central characters? Like Feeny, hardly in there. Eric, shoved to the side and forgot about. Sean, pack it up. You're spending the rest of your life as a codependent to Corey and Topanga's relationship. Like, even Corey and Topanga, I'm like, they're arc of getting married. I mean, the whole opening of the season was, will they get married or not? Then they
Yeah.
get married, and it's like, well, what's next for them? I just don't know that that was a very satisfying arc to me, and I just don't know that any of the characters, even the side characters, like I don't know what the hell Rachel was up to this season. Jack annoyed the hell out of me this season, and Angela, again, hardly there or hardly given a voice. So it's really hard to pick a favorite character. I don't know.
Yeah,
Topanga, I
Here's the
guess.
thing. I love that you said that, because if I'm being honest, I would say that maybe this is the most work and most depth that Danielle is given to do. So like if we want to have like an honorary one, I would go with Topanga as well. But for the most of the season, it's all over the place. A lot of characters either are sidelined or like they're behaving outside of the characters we've known them to be.
Mhm.
And then like you were like Jack annoyed you. I was like, I think everyone should remember we didn't really start being bothered by Jack till that second half. Like Jack was, his behavior wasn't bad in the beginning. He was still learning. He was still kind of being like a character. He had like his Feeny moments. We had him with the student union job. He had a little diva off with his new boss who never became relevant and like all this other stuff. So again, we have fun characters, but he just doesn't do anything. I guess you know who I'm gonna say? Lieutenant Moore. Lieutenant Moore is gonna be
Lieutenant Moore is your number one.
He's the, I mean, think like as far as I'm concerned, he nails it in Angela's Ashes and he nails it in Angela's Men. So I think Lieutenant Moore is my favorite character of the season.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll agree. I don't have a favorite one.
Okay, that being said, what is the most improved character?
Is it fair to say that I felt every character de-evolved in some way, shape, or form? Like, I don't know that any character is stronger now than they were at the end of last season.
That is, you know what? I think if we're going to use that barometer, I'm going to say that I'm going to give two people credit. One would be Topanga, because
Okay.
Topanga actually, if we're going to look at where we ended last season, she was a wreck. Her parents were getting divorced. She didn't know what she was going to do.
Mhm.
And she was just kind of relegated to being Corey's wife.
Yeah.
In this finale, Topanga, whether we feel like it was earned or not, she is her own individual person. She is going to New York for something that she wants to do.
Yeah.
She is, we've seen her like fall in love with Corey again, even though we advise against it. We've seen her plan a wedding, have the wedding, have fights with her friends, have fights with her husband, excel at a career. Like there's a lot. Topanga was actually given a lot to do, and I think that Topanga actually had the most to grow if you want to talk about improvement. And then also, if we're gonna do that, I'm gonna say Sean. Sean is also a character who went on a journey looking for himself. When we meet him, he's actually the more mature and stable one throughout the friendship, and has a lot of heart to hearts with characters. And even though he doesn't want to, he lets Angela go and he allows her to have the time with her father, but also express his wants and needs, being like, hey, Angela, I do care for you, and I think you're really important. And then when all else fails, he is also going to New York, starting something new. So I feel like Topanga and Eric, sorry, I feel like Topanga and Sean actually do have some growth. Is it like an arc in the sense of like it's continuous? Maybe not, but I feel like they get there a little bit higher than where they were last season.
You know, yeah, I can see all those points that you're making. I think the thing that's really difficult for me is that I feel like there was no other season of this show that put Topanga in a more traditional gender role than this season did. I don't know if Topanga, outside of the very last episode or two, has a story that doesn't involve Corey. I don't know that Sean is given any opportunity to grow emotionally, to heal or repair relationships, or set himself up for a better future this season compared to previous seasons. So, although you're making a lot of good points, I think in general, season 7 seems, at least to me, to really have de-invested in characters that needed like just a little bit more attention to get them to a point where like they had satisfying arcs. So
Again, I can't really argue it because we've talked about it. It's been
mm,
chaotic, and I'm
yeah.
not going to be like, no, what are you talking about?
Mm.
All of that said, I think personally that they did have some growth, and even though it wasn't to the lengths that we would have liked it to be, I can still see changes in the characters.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, do you have any favorite clips or any like thing in particular that you think of
Favorite moments like from the season? Obviously the finale is gonna sit in my heart and like be a really special like spot. I feel like I mean, in general, as part of the series, I feel like that moment's really gonna live on. But taking the finale out of it, it's kind of hard for me to think of like moments that I'm like, wow, I really loved what they did there. And so I'm gonna pass it to you to see what you say about this.
I already told you some of mine. I feel like I really liked the um when we did brotherly shove, I really liked Eric actually stepping up and defending himself. And kind of being like, Corey, you don't treat me well. And I deserve better than that. I really liked that we did that. I had fun with the beginning of war before it got too out of hand. I already brought up Lieutenant Moore and how much I enjoyed his presence. And then also, I'm going to say we have a lot of Jarek moments that I'm just not going to let go of. I
Okay.
find all of my evidence for Jarek is supported in this season, and I think in a modern storytelling way, Jack and Eric would be an official couple.
I I'll say this about Jack. One of my favorite moments from Jack comes from the You Light Up My Union episode. And
Mhm.
in that episode, there's a moment where Feeney is able to help Jack kind of determine what kind of person he wants to be in the world. And he's referring to like, Jack's kind of saying like, oh, I hate like Eric's irresponsibility and all these things. And then Feeney's like, I actually think that you have a lot that you can learn from Eric. And so that was probably the one like Jack moment that I was like, oh, I did like that. I liked Sean and Angela's like farewell goodbye in terms of like how it was acted. I thought they both did great. I mean Sean's look on his face when Angela leaves is just like priceless. And then again, all of my other favorite moments come from Brave New World too. So it's I don't know. If
Again,
there's
like
other
I'm
highlighted
gonna say,
moments, let us know, guys, because there were a lot of things like, yes, in like a montage format, the pranks on Topanga in the Angela's Men episode, the whole prank war, a lot of the wedding shenanigans, I think in a like clip montage format seem very fun and exciting, but to actually sit down and watch those episodes, I don't know that they pay off.
well, I mean, like we've talked about this before, but I absolutely think it is worth having the discussion of when we get Topanga and Corey looking for a house in
Oh
the
yeah.
honeymoon is over. And even I think in the provider as well, there are moments where we actually show them have to deal with the consequences of their actions, i.e., getting married young.
Yeah.
And we actually have Amy have like these Amy and Alan have these really tough conversations with Corey. And that moment where I believe they are at home and he's fixing the sink and it's just like he's
Yeah,
covered in
that's a
slime
great
and all
moment.
like
Yeah.
these are things that I'm like, oh, romance wasn't completely dead. So
Hmm.
I have some very fond memories
Okay. All right.
of this season. Okay, let's move on to Detention.
Thank
Um
you. Let's get to
is
what
that
we didn't
did it?
like.
So holding everything that you could. Okay, so that being said, you seem to have already done your research, but what
Oh,
was
I did.
lowest graded episode of the season?
Mm, mm, my least favorite episode was What a Drag.
What a drag.
Hands down.
Not only was your least favorite episode, you gave it the only F we've ever given. I went back and I
Ooh.
looked and I was like, have we given an F to anything else? This is the only F on record, and it is What a
Wow.
Drag. And it is also rated our lowest, just in terms of our total grading, followed by Show Me the Love. We did not like the premiere of this
Which
season.
was your lowest rated episode, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a terrible season premiere. Like, I think when I went back and listened to our episode of Show Me the Love, the thing that we kept saying was there was nothing about this episode that excited me to watch another season of this show. I think that if I've been watching TGIF for 10 years, if I'm getting a little old and I turn in to see that as the season 7 episode, like
Yeah.
like the opener for that season, I don't know that I'm inspired to keep coming back week after week. It's Friday night. Like, people are
Yeah.
out and about. You got to give me a reason to stay home. So I just don't know that this season was it. And I think that opener was a great reminder of that.
So here, I do want to say, when we're talking about the fans' least favorite episodes, it's funny because the most feedback that we got, I know the fans would say that As Time Goes By is their least favorite episode, because that is the one that we've gotten the most. Like, someone was like, there was no renewal for a season 8 after that episode. However, the least listened to episode, and maybe that's, you can judge that however you want to, but our least listened to episode, and the one that we got the least traction on, and therefore, to me, since it's the one that you guys just don't even watch if you can, is How Corey and Topanga Got Their Grooves Back. That is actually the one that you guys hate even more.
That is interesting. I think we rated that episode pretty low as well. And
Yeah.
honestly, like, there's a lot of stinkers. Like, I'm not surprised that that's on the bottom list. I think that, I mean, How Corey and Topanga Got Their Groove Back, you gave it a C minus. That was your second lowest grade. It was on my list for number 4 on my
Yeah.
least favorite episodes, with a D minus. So, like, neither of us liked it. There's nothing about that episode that's significant, and I think you can ultimately skip it. I think a lot of episodes this season you can skip. Show Me the Love, How Corey Topanga Got the Groove Back, As Time Goes By, For Love in Apartments. Skip that shit. Like,
Yeah.
it opened like really, really badly. Like, I think the opening chunk of the season was a mess, and I don't think it's till we got to like the wedding stuff that the show kind of found like a path to take for these characters, because everything before that kind of feels all over the place.
You guys didn't really give us much feedback on the How Corey and Topanga Got Their Groove Back, although someone did point out, which I will say, when we review Girl Meets World, I point out that given the age, if we're going to take it in real time, Topanga went to New York pregnant. Like, she didn't know she was pregnant at the time, but given the age that Riley is when we begin Girl Meets World, she would have had to be born around the time season 7 ends. So that means that Topanga unknowingly is pregnant with Riley in this moment. And someone said it'd be funny if this episode, the How Corey and Topanga Got Their Groove Back, is the moment it happens. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, covered in whipped cream and shit. Okay.
Exactly. Hey, that could
Yeah.
have been the moment that Riley was given. So it does become a significant episode. And then also, I wanted to read some of you guys's, as I said, you were very vocal about As Time Goes By. So I just want to read some of the things here. Okay. So we have Brad Steele 12 says, I can see I'm in the minority here, but I absolutely love this episode. So just wanted to point that out. Then we get Messiah HAXOXO. So that's what I'm going to call it. It says, I didn't even watch this episode, but I found your back and forth fascinating. I feel like regardless of how it went with Topanga, to me, it wouldn't have mattered because it would have been a little too late. They've had several seasons to do more with this character and they failed. So in the end, it's all disappointing. I feel like it hit me even more when I watched the season 5 premiere. of Pod Meets World. Topanga is just the girlfriend, and it's upsetting. I don't know. I'm excited for y'all to finish, but at the end of the day, so many missed opportunities. So that's her review. Anything that you want to say to that one?
One thing I want to say about As Time Goes By, it was the lowest watched episode of season 7 during its original run, too. It's never been a popular episode. So I feel like all the complaints that were left by our guests, because we did have a few comments on those videos about them not liking this episode, is totally justified. But then again, the people who like it, like, I want to say all power to you. Like, we all have little things that we like about the show, and if this episode appeals to you, that's great. We've become fantastic friends with Erica, who wrote that episode, and like, we never want to give her a hard time because she's great. She's wonderfully talented. But that episode just never resonated with me, so I don't want to like give it shit, but it just never was an episode that I thought fondly of. So I think that us giving our opinions on this and it being echoed through our fan base says something about these time travel alternative world episodes, because the timelines are just all over the place.
I will say we go down in history as being anti time travel episodes whenever they do it on this show. So like that is our reputation on Pod, and that will most likely remain. And then also I want to just say that I am an As Time Go By apologist. I will admit that it's not necessary, and having watched the entirety of the season, I can in fact admit that that time could have been better used, giving us a graduation episode for Eric, Jack, and Rachel. That little deleted scene could have been like its own episode.
Sure.
I really would have liked more, but if it were to come on syndication, I don't know, I'd probably watch it and have a good time. So that's me.
Here, let me just throw this at you real fast. The other least watched episodes of the season in terms of like the Nielsen ratings when it aired were Angela's Ashes and Family Trees. Family Trees being the one with Ghost Chet. And the most watched episodes of the season were The Honeymooners was number 1, It's About Time was number 2, and The Honeymoon Is Over is number 3. So those wedding episodes really did draw in the crowd.
Of course. You had Corey and Topanga getting married, and I am not shocked that we all wanted to see what that would be like.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Okay, now it is time for our graduation ceremony, which I think now is just everyone. Like,
it's everyone. It's Feeney, it's the Matthews, it's the Hunters, it's Angela, it's Rachel, it's everyone.
Yes, but you know what? I will say, if we want to take like the full graduation of it all, I think the only character that we get that we really don't see again in terms of even in Girl Meets World would be Rachel. I think this is it for Rachel. We get almost from our main cast, we get everyone to come back except Rachel. That's it. This is she went to the Peace Corps and no one ever heard from her again.
Yeah, I mean, again, even Girl Meets World I kind of treat as a separate timeline. Like, to me, like, these characters really gave their final bow. They did it in such a like beautiful way too, their final bow, like so gracefully. And I think the thing that I love about the final episode of this season of the series is that we do get an official goodbye. There were so many times when characters would graduate and I had to let you know, as someone who's seen the show 1,000 times, hey, Minkus doesn't come back. Hey, Turner doesn't come back. Hey, Verna doesn't come back. Like, we never get official goodbyes with many of the characters that we grow attachments to. So I think the fact that like all of the central characters, for the most part, even Angela, gets an official send-off, I think allows this graduation ceremony to feel more like an actual graduation ceremony.
To that, the only thing that I'm going to complain about is that we didn't get an actual graduation ceremony. Like, I know that we did it for Corey, Sean, and Topanga last season, or 2 seasons ago at this point in time. So maybe they felt like we've already done a graduation episode, but again, we've talked about it ad nauseum. I don't want to get too far into it, but the fact that we fought so hard to make Eric go to college, we spend a few episodes actually having Eric and Jack at least talk about what they're going to do after they graduate. And there's even that one episode where Rachel is like deciding what she wants to do, and she's like, maybe I'll be a vet. Like, I feel all of that deserves to allow these characters to graduate as well.
Let me just say this as like a little cap to everything we've talked about. There are some overall things about this season that will never sit right with me. The destruction of Angela and Sean, the treatment of Rachel, Eric's like storyline, the fact that Jack never gets close to the people he's around at all, to anyone. There's so many things where it's like it's really hard on a grand scale to ignore these issues. And as someone who's watched every season, a lot of these issues are issues that got introduced in season 7. So it was like, they could have very easily, I feel like, structured a lot of these things differently to give us a more pleasing season. So when I think about season 7 as a whole, that's what I'm walking away with, was missed opportunities.
Like our last comment just said, missed opportunities. To that point, I also want to say that when I think about it, I wonder, what would you think would have been an ideal season 7? Because I think you and I had like, let's even like remember the fact that like we end on Corey and Topanga not knowing if they're going to get married. Like last we saw, Eric was leaving town, and Corey and Topanga were like unsure if they were going to keep their summer wedding. Like that's what we end at in season 6.
Yeah.
So what would you have liked this season to be if you could rewrite season 7?
Cool. Okay, this is a big question, and I'm probably not going to I'm probably an hour from now, I'm going to be thinking about answers to this question. But like, to just kind of put it basic, I would have liked it if, starting with kind of Corey and Topanga, if after the season 6 finale and their whole thing with like the parents not working out, it kind of opened Topanga's eyes to the idea that like, hey, the only reason I really wanted to rush into this marriage, the only reason I really proposed was because I was freaking out about Yale. I didn't want to go, and I wanted like a safety net. I wanted something here. And I'm realizing that I've limited myself. I would love for her to have come to that realization over the summer, for her to say, you know what, Corey, I had a lot of ambitions, I had a lot of things I wanted to do in this world, and I want to focus my attention on that. And if you really want to be my ride or die, you'll stick with me through that. And this whole season would have been her leading up to getting her internship. That's what I would have liked to have seen for those two. No wedding. They're too damn young. I don't want it. I don't care. For Sean,
no wedding. You're going no wedding.
I'm going no wedding.
Okay. Okay.
This is my call. For Sean and Angela, I would have loved it for them to have moved in together. I would have loved it if, they talked about like pursuing something a little bit more serious. Maybe Sean bought an engagement ring before Angela's dad came back. Like, I would have loved to have seen all that. But of course, I would have loved it if Sean had went to Europe with Angela at the end and had his grand send off. For Eric and Jack and Rachel, honestly, I would have really loved for this season to focus on what they're going to do after college. What are their majors? What are they doing in terms of extracurriculars or internships or whatever to prepare for that next step? And what does it mean for them to be going to this next level and having to say goodbye to all their friends? Like, I would have loved that. I don't necessarily need Eric to have all of the shenanigans that we've seen. I would have much rather this be him finishing something that he started, which was going to college, and how important that was for him and Feeney to really focus on that. So overall, that's really what I would have loved to have seen from this season. I would have loved if the finale was Sean going to Europe, Eric maybe going with Jack to California, going somewhere else, like, hey, the two of us are going to go do our own thing. I would have loved it if, Corey and Topanga went to New York on their own and understood, hey, we're choosing our relationship in each other over the Sean and everything else that we've built up over 7 seasons. So that's my ideal season 7. I know there's must be complaints, and I'm very looking forward to hear what you have to say about your ideal season 7.
Well, the one thing that I want to point out is that you went down every character except Corey. You didn't even have Corey in your final season.
No. He's an accessory to Topanga in my season 7.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. I'm gonna agree with a lot. I don't know if we could get by without having them actually get married. And I actually, so some of my favorite episodes this season is them getting married and having to deal with the consequences of being married young. I actually think that's really great. But I do agree with you where it's like I would have liked if we opened up season 7. I when I think about it, I was like, what if we moved as time goes by to the very first episode in season 7? And that whole Topanga, who am I, lost identity, noir murder mystery thing, that actually becomes relevant and it becomes kind of like the thesis statement. You know what I'm saying? And like you have all these questions because you just watched season 6 and you're like, what's going to happen? What's, did they get married or not? And to kind of open it up with like this kind of fun romp that still is like Topanga searching for herself, but also not really letting you know where everyone else is. I just kind of feel like that would have been like a really cool and bold move. But overall, if we're going to talk about story arcs, I agree with you. I would have loved if we would have started off with Topanga and the girls living together and actively spending at least half the season on that, where we are doing hijinks with the 3 girls. We are learning what it's like to be
A little
roommates.
bit more living single.
A little bit more living single,
Yeah.
a little bit more living single, and a little bit more of Corey having to, like, not this idea of I know that Topanga and I are meant to be, but also, you know what? I am young. I do have other things that I need to be focusing on, and
Yeah,
seeing
because
what that's
Corey,
like.
honestly, everything about Corey this season was focused on Topanga. Like,
Yeah,
it was so rare, and I don't know if we ever get a moment of Corey kind of thinking about his future and what's next for him. And honestly, that should have been the central focus for every single college character this season was what is next and how am I getting ready for it?
what is next and how am I getting ready for it? And then to your point, I was like, I would have liked to see. I was thinking about it, like, what if we just had like a little depressed Corey for the first few episodes, like someone who's
Yeah.
actually dealing with the fact that this long-term relationship is not there, and again, still needing to figure out what he's going to do.
If Corey realized in the beginning of the season, like, hey, I've been half of a person and I need to be a whole person in order to invite this person into my life, that would have been a great arc for him.
Absolutely. I would have liked if we opened up the season not knowing where Eric was and we like legit just kind of like gave it some room to breathe. Like this idea of like him being away and not knowing where he went.
Yeah.
Or I think wasn't he supposed to like I think we know in real life he was supposed to go to California, but like I can't remember what the show said he was supposed to be doing in the
You know
beginning.
what? I changed my mind. I don't want that. I want Eric realizing that he wants to be a weatherman, and I want Eric to graduate and go back to the station, and we see him working as a weatherman. That's what I want.
Oh, what? First of all, you interrupted mine,
I'm
but
so
all
sorry.
I was gonna say is I would have really liked it if like he actually went out to the East Coast and failed.
Ooh.
And like this idea of like, hey, I went and the real world tore me up. I'm not ready. And then, as you said, remembering who he was and spending this time in school working towards being a weatherman.
Yeah.
I do feel like that's really great. And how great would it have been if like the season ended with him at least getting an internship or like being a production assistant as the weatherman?
Oh man, can you imagine? It's the graduation episode, and in the back of the theater, who do we see clapping next to Mr. Feeney? Eli. Eli is there,
Oh,
and he
you said
walks.
Eli. I was
Yeah.
thinking the weatherman who I can't remember
Oh
what
no,
he's
I
on
can't
side. I thought that would have been hilarious if it is like that weatherman.
They bring back Eli, and he's like, "Hey, I remember I promised you a job," and then that's how it happens. Oh, like if you're gonna give us a cameo, give us Eli.
We already talked about it. There were no blacks allowed in the finale, so
Ooh.
I'm sorry, we're gonna have to pass. Okay. And as you said, I feel like if we would have done it this way, we would have allowed time for Angela and Rachel to get some storylines and really learn who they are.
Yeah.
I think no matter what, I just would have liked some people to have a major and really learn about themselves. And I've said this before, I really would have liked if we started off season 6 with Jack not having Eric, but still having to be around everyone because that's his community, and having a few storylines where Jack and Sean are living together, and therefore they have like a little brother romp or whatever. And then also, I am sticking to my fan theory of I would have loved if we would have established that Jack does not like Corey. And that little tension of him being like, yeah, I don't really like you. And with Eric not being there, it would have been fun. It could have been like this through line. And then I just feel like it would have made more of his character fun. So that's what I want to
You
get.
know
And
what?
then it all ends with Jack, Rachel, and Eric graduating, to your point. Eric getting a job at the as a weatherman. Jack, I feel like they can still do the Peace Corps or whatever, but I feel like at least in that point in time, we've learned more about this character and we actually care what's going to happen with him.
I was going to say it would have really meant a lot to me to see Eric, I'm sorry. It would have meant a lot to me to see Sean and Jack form a bond over Chet's passing. Yes. I feel like Chet's passing was one of those things that happened in season 6 and affected Jack so deeply. And then he immediately directed all his attention on Rachel. And it would have been really nice if this season saw like them like actually hanging out and it not being awkward and it being this thing where Sean isn't as dependent on Corey because him and his brother's relationship is doing really well. Like it would have just been really nice to just see that like, hey, people can be happy outside of Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. And very much kind of like how we did with Angela. I would have liked if we would have actually had there be an appearance of Jack's stepfather. And we cast that role, and it's
you mean
Ving Rhames. Yeah.
Ving Rhames.
have Ving Rhames come in as his stepfather in the beginning of the season, and then at the end of the season, come in and give him that decision in person, being like, hey, we've talked about this. Or again, even if we would have had like a flashback of like, hey, I didn't tell you guys this, but when my stepfather came to visit, he actually gave me a job at his company, and that's what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah,
I'm required to show up for work, and my life is like laid out for me, which again makes the giving it all up and going to the Peace Corps more of a moment. So these are theories that I would have liked if I could have made season 7. Yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about everything?
I love this show. This is my favorite show. I wouldn't have spent all this time talking about it if I didn't care about it. That being said, this season is not the season that I would choose to show people of Boy Meets World who have never seen the show. I think that like if you're able, it like season 7 feels like, and I think we mentioned this a few times, it's like watching The Office after Michael leaves.
Yes.
Where it's like there's something different. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's not sitting right with me. And it doesn't feel like the characters that I fell in love with. So overall, I'm glad we got the ending that we had. Truly, Brave New World saves the season so much for me. There are like 2 or 3 episodes that really make such a difference to me in terms of reviewing the season. But overall, I'm still not like I think that the opinion I had of season 7 going into it, my trepidation and being like, I don't really know. I stand by that, honestly, 100%.
And I can't blame you. Something that we didn't do is we didn't really talk about like what the final grade of the season would be.
Oh, yeah.
And I just kind of want to bring that up really quickly because when I did everything, this episode got a 77.6. So it's a C plus in our grading scale. And I do want to say that does put it at like the bottom of all the other seasons.
Really? Okay.
Our current ranking goes season 4,
of course,
season 3, season 5, season 1, season 6, season 2, season 7. We really did not like season 2. So when I look at that, I was just like, oh, but I wanted to say that like our season 2 had like a 78 and our season 7 has a 77.6. All of that being said, it never goes below a high C this entire series. And I think that's really important to note that like out of all 7 seasons, there's not one where we were like, just throw the whole thing away. There's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Honestly, obviously we'll talk about this more when we do our series recap, but I think that 7 in general belongs exactly where it's at on that list. Not
Absolutely.
at the bottom, but not terrible.
Exactly. One of the things that we didn't do is we didn't talk about our Bruh Award, the most culturally relevant moment. Do you have one?
Most culturally relevant moment of the series of the season of season 7. Um I think that just the character of Rachel has been my bruh moment for a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And I think season 7 is a great example of like, okay, we've had 2 seasons with this character. In season 6, I felt that they made her a sexual object. And in season 7, they ultimately like forgot about her, abandoned her, never gave her depth, always there as like the butt of a joke.
Yep.
Never really giving the respect as like an independent character. Like she
Yep.
always was just kind of like put in as the woman needed for any given storyline. So I in general, like even the war episode, which should have been so focused on Rachel specifically, ended up
Right?
being about almost everyone but Rachel. So I'm gonna say ultimately my Bruh Award for season 7 is the treatment of women, starting from Angela's dad and boyfriend deciding who she loves, starting from Topanga having to sacrifice her wedding for Sean and Corey's relationship, and then ultimately with even Amy not getting any focus on her just giving birth and nearly dying from it, and then Topanga too. Like there's so many moments where I just feel like the women, Rachel, the women and the characters just were really not treated well. So,
The women, mostly Rachel.
well,
Funny
yeah,
the way you said that.
yeah.
No, keep
So
going. Or was that everything?
yeah, that's my broad moment. It's just like the treatment of women, I think, in this season was just like it's not so much that they wrote them to be like the harlots or the bitches or the sluts the way that we saw in like the earlier seasons. It just
Mm-hmm.
felt like they were forgotten about, which I think is like a bigger indicator to what's going on. And it's a shame because according to Erica, there's never been more women on the show on the writing staff than in like the later seasons. And
Right?
it doesn't seem like maybe Michael Jacobs was willing to extend the same screen time to those characters as he was the male characters.
I think it's very important, and we are like very intentionally not talking about Michael Jacobs because I maybe we'll get into this when we do our series recap, but I want us to just think about what it means seeing when he was involved and when he wasn't involved. I think that is a very interesting experiment for us to do.
Yeah, and honestly, like I'll say this. You know what? Never mind. I'm gonna save it for the series
You're
for the
like,
series
I'll
movie.
say this. Actually,
Yeah,
no, I won't.
I won't. You have to come back next week to find out what I was gonna say, motherfuckers.
Okay. Really quickly, another thing that I wanted to do is shout out to our guests this season. We had so many
Yeah.
guests, and I want to make sure that we share Mark Blutman, Gary H. Miller, Erica Montolfa, Sav Rogers, Miles Warden, Allison M. Gibson, Ryan Schwartz, Jeff Manel, all of our guests who were on this season. We truly appreciate you coming on.
I'm sure there
And
was more, by the way, like Jenny
yeah.
Ann Hutchberg. There was a few others that we had just come on, do like little post-episode conversations. We appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I wanted to make sure that we shouted you guys out. Thank you so much. We will probably talk to some of these people at future recordings, but wanted to give everyone
Can I say something real fast about our guest? I loved every single guest that we had on this season. We were so fortunate to mostly through the writer's strike, which is funny.
yeah,
What part of the reason our season got delayed because of the writer's strike, but funny enough, we were able to make these connections with the writers during the writer's strike to have them on.
yeah.
I love every episode. For those of you who just listened to like our episode recaps, I definitely encourage you to go back and listen to some of our interviews. Specifically, my favorite one being our Allison Gibson interview, which is
Fantastic.
she was a writer on Boy Meets World. She also went on to create Reba. And I've listened to a lot of interviews on both Pod Meets World and the interviews that we've done. I've loved them all, but her interview was so insightful from like if you want to be a writer in television, come listen to that interview. Like it's very few like stories, which I love and are like so important in terms of like podcasting, to be able to kind of like tell these stories about like, you know, how you got to be, but from a technical perspective of just like coming up with ideas and writing and just like what you need to make it. Allison's interview is chef's kiss. So I highly, that was in terms of like our non-episode episodes, that was my favorite one that I would tell people to listen to.
I completely agree. I think that was literally one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done, and then definitely one of my favorite interviews, because that was so insightful. And as I said earlier, she wrote Reba, and I also remember like some of the behind the scenes things that we got to talk to her about. So like, yeah.
Well, really, I mean, honestly, all of the writers that we had on, Gary, Jeff, Mark, Erica, were just like some of my favorite episodes that we've ever done. So I highly encourage people to go back and listen to those.
Absolutely. Okay. You guys, that was season 7. That was season 7,
guys. Can wash my hands of season 7 finally.
I have to admit, you have been talking about this as if it was the worst thing your eyes ever had to deal with. And
well, you know what it was? I just truly felt that out of all of the seasons of the show, this was the one that was going to be I have to watch this episode. And that's kind of honestly how I felt going into it. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised for some, but overall, yeah, duds.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. There was a lot of episodes. We did that. Okay,
we did that. What a drag. We did that.
It was done. I also am very much looking forward to what it will be like when Pod Meets World gets to these episodes. I think this is definitely something that season 7. I think they may quit.
I think that it's going to be really interesting, because I think that we've heard them talk about how they were fatigued. They were kind of over it. They had other things that they wanted to do by the time they got to season 7. I think hearing them review it and seeing almost like within their performances, them kind of being over it, is going to be really interesting too.
Yeah, I totally look forward to seeing maybe some behind the scenes things of them being like, oh, I was working on this, or I had just done that. And so this is why.
Because writers like, I want to go to Columbia. I want to go to college. Get me out of this contract. And like, we're done.
Exactly. So I just looking forward to seeing what this becomes. So again, you guys, thank you so much. As I had mentioned earlier, me and our friend Daniel Clark will be continuing with our reviews of Girl Meets World. We are on season 1 right now, so go check out our Patreon for the first episode of that, and then shortly after our series recap, we will be releasing weekly. And as we said earlier, come back next week when we do our series recap and we talk about all 7 episodes. And we talk about all 7 seasons. We talk about some of our favorites, some of the best of each character, and we also kind of do what we did today and kind of like rearrange some things and do a little shuffle and see what works.
I think the series finale is going to be one of my favorite episodes. Guys, there's so much to consider when putting this finale together. I want you to know we're listening to old episodes. We're going through old show notes. We're really reviewing how we felt. And obviously it's going to be a big task to put all 7 seasons into like a list and be like, okay, what's our like top 10 favorite episodes? What's our favorite story? Like all of those things are going to be really difficult, but a lot of fun. And so I encourage you guys to come back and check out our series finale.
And also, reminder, we are still doing our Pod Meets World reacts. So if you want to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/BruhMeetsWorld, we have Pod Meets World reacts for their season 5. So go check that out. We appreciate hearing from you guys, and see you next week.
Later, bros.
Do we tell them to dream try, or is that over? Did Bill say it? So it's like
Bill said it. We're never saying it again. He said it on behalf of us, and still one of the coolest moments of my life. So no, listen to what William Daniel said last time.
Dream, try, and do good.
All right, later, bros.
Later, bros. This episode of Bruh Meets World was produced by CJ and edited by Tony Curtis. Bruh Meets World is a 2 free tokens media production.
Bye.
Toodles.
When this boy meets world.
Join Jackie and Danielle, two best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees who are rewatching some of their favorite movies from the late 90s and early 2000s on the No More Late Fees podcast. And remember, be kind and rewind.